I'm talking with Peter Kenyon here at Dubbo Airport. Um, Peter, it's good to see you again after 30 years, I think. We met in Burke all those years ago. You came to as a consultant, I suppose, to our community there and had a big impact. Can you tell us what you did when you came to Burke, basically?
Well, 30 years ago, I still vividly remember coming to this place, and I suppose my role is to stimulate conversation. I think I see my role very much as trying to host conversation with local people about what is it they care about and who else cares about that, and what is it we can actually start doing. I'm very much interested in the whole area of just being a community builder. To me, building community is an inside-out job. It's a self-help job. It's about communities beginning to look at what they've got and where do they want to go with that and what's the best way to go with that and how we're going to do that together. And therefore, the first question always to ask people is, what do you care about? Okay. And who else cares about that? And how do we actually take that? And that's the first fundamental asset that these towns have.
I remember you saying that the cavalry is not going to come. Like the small towns, you can expect the government or someone's going to come and do it for you, but no, they're not. Correct?
No, and that's still the reality. I mean, I estimate across the country probably still over 70% of our small towns are dying. They're losing business, they're losing population, their young people don't want to be found dead in these places. And the fundamental reason is they are still waiting for that cavalry out of the Sydneys and Canberras of the world. And I'm saying to people, no, this is a self-help job. This is an inside out. This is all about grassroots participation. Don't look at what's the latest government grant. Look at what have we got as assets. And those assets are physical, those assets are people, those assets are networks and groups, but also those assets are stories. Every community has stories. And
I remember you saying that the world's made up not of atoms but stories.
Stories, it is. And you just listen to a good storyteller, you'll never forget it. I mean, you can quote statistics to people. You can
I can
quote
still remember some of your stories.
Yeah, and you quote the theory. You can quote us as Christians. We love to tell the theology. We love to get all that stuff out. But tell a story, and no one forgets that. They'll forget all the other. You can tell people even a statistic, and people will forget. But tell people a good story. And boy, they never forget a good story.
And more than that too, Peter, I think you taught us that setting those stories to work can have a regenerative effect on a community. It certainly did in Burke and still is.
Yep.
Are you seeing this not just here in Australia, you've travelled the world doing this? Yep.
Without doubt, I think stories inspire. And I think one of the things I find sad is people forget their stories and they don't use those stories. And yet those stories can regenerate spirit in town. They regenerate a sense of pride. Getting people, I love these days just getting a group together in a community and just say, let's go around the room and let's tell everyone something about me that I'm proud of that no one else in this room will know.
So you've done that just now in Coonabarabran?
In Coonabarabran, and it's amazing where people will start relating stories out of their life, things they've done, and all I hear people say, I didn't know you'd done that, I didn't know you'd done that. And with it, we're starting to asset map the most valuable asset in the community, which is people and what they bring, their experiences, their stories, and so on. And so I still love that. My role, when people say, what do you do? I'd probably say, look, I'm in the whole area of just trying to build this thing called community, but my main role is hosting conversation and listening to stories.
So can you tell us a story about how story was put to work and worked?
I suppose I'm very much, if I take one little area, I love getting people focused, very much on discovering their assets, and that everyone has assets. Everyone cares about something, and if we want to rebuild community, let's start with what people care about and what they bring to the table, not our agenda, not what we want them to do and whatever. And I remember once going to a Black Baptist church in Cincinnati in the United States, and there was a minister there called Damon Lynch III, and every night he ran a soup kitchen for 200 homeless people. And I remember seeing and thinking, I've never seen a soup kitchen like this before. Most soup kitchens do a great job, they're a great expression of compassion, but they're fundamentally community feeding centres. This was a community eating centre. And I saw things there that night that I could never, ever see anywhere else. The first thing I noticed, I couldn't work out who were the churches and who were the homeless. This was one group having such a wonderful night together. And I listened and heard amazing stories. And the minister said, it wasn't always like that. It wasn't until I employed a young staff member who kept questioning, we are doing a good job feeding people, but their lives are not changing. And the reason their lives are not changing is we do not know them, was her comment to me. And so I mobilised young people in the church. I had 20 young people in the youth group and whatever, and I taught them this little thing that technically is called appreciative inquiry. It's about holding a conversation with people where you drill into the positive core of their life. You get them reflecting on what mattered to them and trying to get them to identify times in their life that they really valued and whatever. Really, it's about capturing the story. And he said, the first thing I've discovered, out of 200 people, over 100 of them said they like cooking. And yet we employed a professional cook to come in. I immediately sacked that cook and invited 25 of them to take over the catering. And subsequently, every one of them is now working somewhere in the hospitality industry. The night I was there was a jazz band playing. You see, why we have a jazz band? Because when we discovered what people had done in their lives, 51 out of 200 played a musical instrument. And so we joined them up. And I remember one guy saying, as a kid I used to love fishing. I got great memories of going fishing. And he said, I've now been through police checks and I take 2 boys from a single parent family who don't have an adult male role model, and I take them fishing once a week. That's my contribution. Where did that come from? A reflection on what in his life was really important. And I suppose Dame the Lynch III said, we were feeding folks, but we weren't getting to know them. And so to me, that's what this is all about. How do we actually tap into this thing that everyone is a contributor, everyone can, you only matter and you only belong if you feel you can actually contribute. And part of that is discovering what it is that people care about. And surprise, surprise, a lot of that, when you ask that question, goes back into stories out of their life.